Hey, shalom, 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 everyone. Glad to be with you. My microphone's peeking through. Oh no. Hey, great to be with you guys. So glad that you are here. Man, there are a lot of questions on the app, which is really awesome. By the way, if you don't have the app, you can go and get the Way Congregation app from your Apple Store or Google Store. So definitely check that out. It's got a lot of great resources. There's a lot of free books, has an audio Bible, has the Torah portions. We also have a Torah portion reading thing in the audio Bible, which is really cool. It's got a calendar, what's going on at the Way Congregation, and much more. So do check that out. And you can put your questions in there for today's show. Also want to let you know that if you want to support this ministry, you can go to my Patreon page, patreon.com/Doug Hamp, and you can give as little as $2 or up to whatever you want. And I just say thank you and a big shout out for all who are already doing that. I really do appreciate it. Helps keep the lights on and all that good stuff. So thank you for that, guys. And if you would, please subscribe, hit the like button and the bell and all that stuff, because it helps to, the algorithm and all that really cool stuff. So, all right, let's get into your questions. I'm looking forward to them as usual. Lots of great questions here. All right, we start off with, let me get back here. All right, Frederico Prack, he says, I did celebrate Pesach with the Way through YouTube. I'm so grateful. Thank you. But why not to enjoy a biblical ceremony like Yeshua did if at the end the Pharisees deny Hamashiach and their costumes are the basis, or I think their customs, their customs are the basis for rabbinic tradition. The kids playing treasure hunt with the Afikomen was funny and also bring to my mind when I used to celebrate the Pascua Catholic and the youngers had to find chocolate eggs. Frederico, I appreciate you bringing that question. That really is an excellent question. Here's something to consider, though. Did you know, or do you know, what is the oldest source for celebrating Passover? Any clues? All right, I'll give you a do. All right, it's actually the New Testament. Okay, so the New Testament is the oldest source that we have and that the Jews have for celebrating Passover. That's how we know about the different cups of wine. That's how we know about breaking the bread and all these different things. So understand that we Christians did not get Passover and the Seder of it from the Jews, but this is something that goes back a long, long time. And the oldest extant source is actually the New Testament. So that's kind of cool, right? I mean, that's really amazing. And ask somebody who's scholarly, okay, who kind of knows their history, and they will tell you the same thing. All right. So that right there is really, really cool. Now, secondly, um, the rabbinic interpretation of the three different matzot, right, the three different pieces of matzah, and why they're in that bag, they're not really sure, right? Why do you have three pieces of matzah, and then you take the middle piece and you break it, and then you take it and you hide it away? They don't know, right? It's just part of the tradition, okay? But I'm convinced that we do know as Christians, as followers of Messiah, we get it, okay? And the reason is because that middle piece, when Jesus took and said, this is my body, and he broke it, he was taking that middle piece of matzah and saying, hey guys, I'm it, okay? So he was saying, do this in remembrance of me, right? That's very, very powerful. And then it's hidden away, okay? How cool is that, right? And then it's the children that find him, right? It's the innocent, are those who have the faith of a child actually get to find Jesus. If you don't have the faith of a child, it says you're not going to enter the kingdom of heaven, right? So we need to have that faith of a child. So I would just encourage you, instead of assuming that all of this stuff is just coming from the rabbis, a lot of it goes back even further. Now, clearly, over the last 2 millennia, who's been keeping this? Well, it wasn't the Christians, sadly, right? Maybe up through that first century, somewhat into the second century. But by, the time that we get to Marcion, 150, 200, the Gentile church has really nothing to do, more or less, with Passover and Jews and Christians are not really speaking anymore for sake of argument. Okay, so we are indebted to the rabbis for keeping a lot of things alive. Doesn't mean excuse me, doesn't mean we have to agree with everything that they've come up with, right? Some of the things they do, I think, are genius, and some I'm like, where did you get that? That makes no sense to me. Okay, so you got to take everything with maybe a grain of salt and kind of take it on a case by case basis. All right. So those are just some things to keep in mind per your question. That's a great question. But again, I think it's assuming that the rabbis had it all first and then we just copied, and that's not the case. All right. So pretty cool when you start digging into this stuff. Okay, this is from Chad. He says, so is there a place where it says how the giants came back after the flood? And to my understanding, although limited, that is why some cities were put to complete destruction, not just driven out, correct? Like I said, my understanding is pretty limited to the subject. All right, so Chad, you're right. There's no well, the place that says it, there is a place, okay, but the place, well, let me just take you there, okay? Instead of trying to explain it, I'll just take you there. All right, this is in Genesis chapter 6. All right, so it says, there were giants on the earth in those days and also afterward, okay? So this is the key passage that tells us that there were giants on the earth, well, in those days, right? Hanaphilim hayu ba'aretz bayimim hahem, Vegam achrechen, right? And also after then, asher. So this word right here, asher, or when, this word when or asher is doing double duty. It's telling us in those days when the sons of God came, and also afterward when the sons of God came. All right. So that word is being used for two different places. Now, that's pretty much all we get as far as how it happened. Okay. Now, in Corrupting the Image, Volume 2, so in this amazing book right here, by the way, just got the announcement that it's available as an audiobook on Audible, okay? Read by yours truly, okay? So I hope you enjoy it. So do check that out. I know some of you have been, saying, Doug, I want the audiobook. Well, now you got it, okay? So you can check that out. And guess what? This one, working on it. Okay, I just before the show, I was recording another chapter. So hopefully that will be done in about a week. And then they have to decide if they're going to accept it or not. So, maybe give it a week or two, and we should have an audiobook for all three Corrupting the Image books. Really excited about that. So make sure to check that out. Anyway, in Corrupting the Image 2, my theory, and again, you can take this or leave this. I bring a lot of evidence from scripture, a lot of evidence from Sumerian and Akkadian Mesopotamian literature to back up my suggestion, but it's a suggestion, okay? And what I'm suggesting is that when after the flood, Satan's kind of licking his wounds and he's like, okay, that didn't work out so well, to having the sons of God come down on Mount Hermon, which I documented in the book, and that dream went down the drain. Okay, so what does he have left? Well, basically, he then chooses one man who is Nimrod, who's the rebel. That's what it means in Hebrew, and in Akkadian and in Sumerian, we find that his name, in Akkadian especially, his name is Ninurta, Lord of the Earth. And who was he the son of? He was the son of Enlil. Who is Enlil? That's from Isaiah 14:12, how you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, right? That word Lucifer is not really in the text. The word there is Halel. Halel comes from Elil, which is from Sumerian, which is Enlil, okay? So Ninurta is a son of Enlil, and Enlil is Satan. All right, so Ninurta, son of Enlil. All right. So in the Bible, we see that Nimrod was a mighty man. Let's take a look at that, because I think that is really the key to this big question. Okay, so Genesis 10. All right, so here we go. The sons of Cush. Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one on the earth. Now, the Hebrew is kind of interesting right here. All right, I'm already there. Zovekush Yalad et Nimrod hu hechel lihyot gibor ba'aretz, right? So he began to be a mighty one on the aretz. He began to be a gibor. Now, a gibor doesn't always mean a hybrid, but it certainly can mean a hybrid. We saw that in Genesis chapter 6, that these were the men of renown, the mighty men, the heroes. And we know that gibor, and I show this in the book, that there's also a word gabar, that's from Mesopotamian literature. Gabar was known as Orion. Okay, so there's too much to go into on that one, but that was also an epithet for Nimrod. Okay, so Gabar was an epithet for Nimrod. Okay, and this is who we're talking about, right? That Nimrod, or Ninurta, same dude, he became a Gabar. He became a god, right? So something happened here. Now, when we look at this in the Septuagint, what we see is that Nimrod actually became a gigas, and the word gigas is the Greek for a hybrid, right? Half God, half man, a demigod, if you will. How did he do that? The Bible doesn't spell it out. But when we look at the ancient Mesopotamian literature, Sumerian and Akkadian, we find that Enlil was the father of Ninurta. And what did Enlil, Satan, give to Ninurta? He gave him his power, throne, and great authority. He gave him the tablet of destinies. And whoever wielded the tablet of destinies had control over the fates of men. Now, I don't think Satan is very much into sharing. So why would he give Ninurta, this human, why would he give him the tablet of destinies? Why would he give him his power, throne, and great authority? Well, we see the same thing in Revelation 13, don't we? Is that the dragon gave his power, throne, and authority to the beast, right? And again, I don't think Satan likes to share unless it is in his own best interest, his self-interest, to do that. And what I argue in Corrupting the Image 3, in this book right here, and I touch on it in the other two books, is that the beast is really going to be a hybrid between Satan and a man, an individual, just like he did with Nimrod. And what does Revelation tell us? The beast that was, is not, and will ascend out of the abyss, right? So the beast, and again, I show this in the, maybe I'll just pull that up because it's been a little while since I've shown you guys this phenomenal picture. I think once you begin to really see that, then it just starts to come into focus in such an incredible way. So let me make that a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. Hold on. I'm also the producer, so that makes my job really exciting. So 1 second, guys. I'm getting there. And there it is. Okay, so you guys can see this, right? So here's the beast. This is Nimrod, but it's also Enlil. It's Nimrod, it's Enlil, right? This is the beast. That's a composite image. And you can see it has talons right here, the talons of an eagle, some kind of feathers there. You can see the wings very clearly. It's got a lion's head. He's vomiting out poison out of his mouth, right? So this is both Nimrod and it's also Enlil, which, I don't know how it can be both, but it is. That's the whole point. And on his back is a woman who rides the beast. This is Ishtar. Astoret, Inanna, she's the queen of heaven. I don't think I have to go into too much detail on her. So this right here, that's Nimrod. That's pretty astounding stuff when you start to really get a kind of just understand all that's going on here. Okay, so anyway, my theory, per your question, how did the Nephilim come back? It was not through a general incursion of fallen angels, but it was one specific fallen angel, namely Satan, who went to one specific man and he overshadowed him. He imparted his DNA into Nimrod, who then transformed from being basic human to then being human plus. He became a god and he became a gigas. He became a hybrid. And then he then fathered others, right? And then he passed on his seed that way. And it's interesting when God is telling Abraham that know for certain your descendants will be slaves and all this, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. The God of the Amorites. Well, first of all, the Amorites is kind of a catch-all term for giants. Okay, we see in Amos 2:9, yet it was I who destroyed the Amorites, whose height was like the cedar. Right. So when he's talking about the Amorites, that is just a general term for giants or for Nephilim. All right, so the god of the Amorites, his name was Amuru. All right, and Amuru, or actually hold on, his name was in Akkadian it's Amuru, in Sumerian it's Martu. All right, so all these different languages. Sorry, I'm trying to keep them straight. So Martu in Sumerian, Martu, Marduk, Nimrod, they're all the same. MRD, MRT, that's the same roots, right? Those are the same roots. And what does that prove to us? Well, goodness, come on, we're talking about the same dude. All right. And then if we start looking at the god Mars, which is from Martes, right? So we get the day Tuesday, if you speak Spanish, Martes, right? It's from the god Mars. And that is not a Latin word. It's actually a Semitic loan word, and they're not quite sure where it comes from. Well, I think I know. It's coming from Marduk, right? And Marduk was the son of Enlil. So Marduk, Nimrod, they're all the same dude. Okay, so long story short, right? That basically it was Nimrod who became a hybrid who then fathered all these other individuals, and yeah, they had Nephilim blood. Okay, I've waxed long enough on that one. Let's move on. Okay, this is from Iris. When do we go into the New Jerusalem? Are we here? Are we in it while it's descending from heaven, or do we enter it when it arrives on earth? Well, Iris, I think partly that depends on whether you're alive or dead when everything comes together. Okay, so now my perspective, right? Now, I firmly believe my perspective, but I just want to let you guys know that my perspective is not the majority perspective. Okay. And I'm okay with that. But the way I put the pieces together, I think it makes a whole lot more sense, is that when Jesus comes back, what is the earth going to be like? It's trashed, right? I mean, it's just totally trashed. The oceans have turned to blood. The mountains have fallen down, and, a lot of nasty stuff. The trees have all burned, and, you can go on. So God is going to restore the planet when he comes back. And by restore, I mean like new heavens and earth restoration kind of stuff. Okay. So the New Jerusalem is not going to be up in the atmosphere or up in heaven for 1,000 years during the millennium. No, the New Jerusalem will be here on earth during the millennium. But the thing is not everybody can go into the New Jerusalem during that time. You must have a new body to go into the New Jerusalem. Let me take you to Revelation 22, which says that very thing. Okay, 22:14. All right, he says, "Blessed are those who do his commandments," some say wash their robes, "that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city. But outside are dogs and sorcerers and sexually immoral and murderers and idolaters and whoever loves and practices a lie." Do you see that? Now, let me just back up really quick to the beginning of this chapter. You have this river of life, and on either side of the river is the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. So, what is the purpose of the tree of life? Well, he tells us right there. The leaves are for the healing of the nations. This right here is also parallel to what Ezekiel says in Ezekiel 47, verse 12. Along the bank of the river, on this side and that, will grow all kinds of trees used for food. Their leaves will not wither and their fruit will not fail. They will bear fruit every month. Sounds very familiar, right? Because their water flows from the sanctuary, from God himself. Their fruit will be for food and their leaves for medicine. Okay, well, goodness. I mean, you've got the same description happening in Ezekiel and in Revelation. All right. And so the tree of life has these leaves that are going to be for the healing of the nation. So that suggests that the nations need healing if they're going to take these leaves and be healed. So the whole idea, what I'm trying to get at is this whole idea that everything is over and done, and then the New Jerusalem comes down after the 1,000 years, when sin has been put away and death has been put away and everything's over. I disagree with that. I think that is leaving out a tremendous amount of scripture. I think that's people who are being just a little bit lazy and are only looking at Revelation, and they're reading it chronologically, which I've made the case many times. We should not read the book of Revelation chronologically. That really does us a great disservice. Rather, it's divided into themes, and a lot of those themes are repeated throughout the book. I don't have time to go into all that right now, but you can go to douglashamp.com and you can get reasons you should read Revelation thematically. Okay. So, when we come to verse 14, now it says, blessed are those who wash their robes or do his good commandments, because then they have the right to the tree of life. And once they have the right to the tree of life, then guess what? They get to go into the city. But the people who are outside, because look, outside the city during the millennium, there will be people who will not believe. There will be people who will rebel. Have we seen that? Absolutely, we've seen that, right? Revelation chapter 20. Revelation chapter 20. So after the 1,000 years are over, Satan's released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth. He's going to gather them to battle. And here they come up on the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. What is the beloved city? It's Jerusalem, right? I mean, that's what it is. So all the people who are outside the city, the beloved city, they're the dogs and sorcerers and idolaters and all who love and practice a lie. Those are the people, and they've not taken of the tree of life. All right. So I'm sorry, guys. Sometimes I've got to explain like how it all fits together. And if I don't, then people are like, well, I didn't explain it well enough. I tried to explain it without repeating myself 100 times. Okay. But that's the nature of this business. So, all right. So Iris, I hope that explains it. I think the New Jerusalem comes down at the beginning of the millennium. Now, I don't know if it's on day 1 or day 2 or day 10. I don't know that, but it's sometime within that very early period of the millennium. Okay. So I won't squabble about, if it's on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I don't know, but it happens very shortly after the second coming of Jesus. It happens probably a little bit after the first judgment there. So anyway, okay, this is from Carol. Carol says, I listened to you last week explain the souls under the altar were conscious. I also heard you say you tend to believe in soul sleep, so I'm confused. In soul sleep, you are not conscious. Could we be reading Revelation 6:9-11 wrongly, and rather we should take it to be symbolic, as in Genesis 4:10? It would not be contradicting then. Many thanks, Doug. Carol, yes. Could I be reading it incorrectly? I think I could. All right. But here's the trouble. Is that we have scriptures that are not easily reconcilable, right? So in Daniel chapter 10, what is Daniel told? That you're going to sleep, okay? And then many of those who sleep will rise from the dust, okay? So I don't know. It doesn't sound like Daniel is underneath the altar. And yet we know in Revelation that there are those who are under the altar. So one possible scenario that could resolve this is that those who are under the altar are sort of in a special time, and they are only the people, or they're specifically the people that died during the time of Jacob's trouble. So I think that is a very plausible scenario, but I can't prove it. That's part of the trouble. I can make a case for it, because what are they given? White robes. And we go to chapter 7, and he says, who are all these people? And he says, these are people who came out of the great tribulation. And what are they given? White robes. Okay. So I think you can make a pretty good case for that. It's just hard to sometimes nail it down and say, this is absolutely what it says, right? So sometimes in academia, sometimes in Bible studies, we have to be willing to just say, well, I don't know. Okay. And again, we can have our theories, we can have our charts, and we can have, kind of the way we think it is, and that's fine. But I think what I don't want to do is I don't get into that place of saying, well, this is it and that's final. Because look, I don't stand in God's place. I can tell you and show you what God's word says, but we have a lot of different passages that are speaking about these different things. And clearly, there's this whole concept of sleeping. Now, again, whether a person is just completely unconscious, that's what I lean to. But there's other passages that maybe that's not entirely the case. So I'm sorry, I just can't tell you exactly what it's going to be because I see all these different passages. Okay. All right, moving on. Thank you, Carol. This is from Iris. She says, do you believe that the Garden of Eden is the New Jerusalem? Well, kind of. Let's go to Ezekiel 28 because that is where we probably have the best evidence for this question. So, son of man, take up a lamentation for the king of Tyre. It says, you are the seal of perfection, full of wisdom. All right, so this is Satan. Again, you can read the book if you want to go into all the detail. It says, you were in Eden, the garden of God, all right, and all these amazing stones. And then notice, you were the anointed cherub who covers, I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of the fiery stones. All right, and so then, because of the abundance of the bad stuff he was doing, you sinned, and I cast you as a profane thing out of the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O covering cherub, for the midst of the fiery stones. So I would suggest that the New Jerusalem and the Garden of Eden are not the same place, but they're very closely connected. All right. So I don't think they're the same place, but they're closely connected. All right. I think that, and it even talks that you defiled your sanctuaries. A sanctuary is an enclosed place that's supposed to be set apart, like a garden, right? So I would say that you've got, the New Jerusalem, which is a pyramid, by the way. Here you got this, and Satan, he's walking around in this thing. And then down below over here, or wherever, I don't know, whichever side it's on, then you have the garden that's, on planet Earth, right? And the city was on the garden. It was on the planet as well. And then the garden specifically on the earth and produce coming up from the earth, not in the city itself. And so then Satan was then entrusted with this sacred place that he was supposed to guard over, this garden. And there were two humans there, and he was supposed to watch over them, which he did a really bad job, right? He deceived them and swindled them out of their birthright. So that's how I would put all that together. Thank you. All right, this is Chad. He says, what are your thoughts of the Arab summer and the start of the first seal? I listened to an interesting YouTube that talked about how Muhammad rode on a white horse called Barak, and the correlation of Ishmael being a hunter, the rider of the white horse carrying a bow. Pretty sure you don't believe this in the first seal. Yeah, so look, Chad, I'd be happy to give you this book right here. Okay. I think you'll really enjoy it. So, hit me up on Shabbat and I'll just give it to you. All right. My gift. All right. I want you to read this because I think after you read this, you'll be like, yeah, it's not Muhammad. And you'll see why. Because the whole motif of somebody riding on a white horse with a bow goes back way before Muhammad, right? Muhammad is like late in the whole grand scheme of world history. But when we go back to ancient Sumer, and who do we find? Nimrod or Ninurta, who had a bow, right? He was the first hero, which is what we're told about him in Genesis chapter 10, right? He's the first Gibor, the first hero. And that epithet, that whole idea of him being the hero, he also becomes Heracles or Hercules. Okay. I mean, it's just mind blowing how many times we start seeing this guy. And once you really have put some of these dots together and you see, oh, yeah, it's not Muhammad. So I don't think it's Muhammad at all. I think that is, I mean, I understand why people do it, but I really don't believe that the beast and his forces will be Muslims. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that Muslims got it all right, because they certainly don't. And I don't think it's necessarily the Catholic Church And they don't have it all right, and I don't have it all right. But understand that these different groups can be part of the problem, but not the definition of the problem. All right. So I think we have to go back all the way back to ancient Sumer, because who are we looking for? The beast that was, is not, and ascends out of the abyss. Does that really properly describe Muhammad? No, right? Again, Muhammad had his issues, no question about it. Islam has its issues, lots of issues. Okay, so I'm not defending them, but understand that they're kind of a Johnny come lately scenario, and we have to go back to the beast that was, is not, and ascends out of the abyss. Right. So that's why I would suggest that people are missing that. And I know some people suggest that, well, the rider on the white horse is not the same as the beast. He absolutely is the beast. There's no question in my mind at all. Because again, what did we find of the different epithets, the descriptions of Ninurta? Well, he was carrying a bow. That was a really big deal. He had stars as part of his retinue. He was the guy riding the beast for sure. We also see him as a centaur, right? A half man, half horse type deal. And he's got two heads. He's the very beast that's coming out of the abyss as well. I mean, it's just, when you look at the pictures and you see the descriptions, well, I'll let you decide, of course, but I hope the evidence will be very compelling for you as you read the book. So hit me up on Shabbat. I'll even throw in a little bonus. Okay. My gift to you. All right. Because I want you to read them. That's really what I want people to do, is just read the things. If you can't afford it, just, let me know. Yeah. He said, you also said, he also had a cool teaching on how the two witnesses are not the two houses, or excuse me, are the two houses and not two literal people. Again, I respectfully disagree with that. Now, could these two individuals represent different things like the two houses? Sure. I absolutely agree with that. And I really lay out the case for that in Corrupting the Image, Volume 3. You cannot have the death of the house of Israel and the house of Judah for 3.5 days. I mean, it just doesn't work. Okay. The house of Israel and the house of Judah are not calling down fire from heaven. They're not turning the seas into blood. I just think it's weak, frankly. I think it's misguided and not looking at all the facts. So please read the books. And if you don't want to read them and you want to listen to them, guess what? Audiobooks, right? So that's the secret sauce. Okay, let's keep going. All right, this is from Iris. If the tree of life is in heaven in the New Jerusalem, what happened to the angel that was guarding it when it was in Eden? Iris, I don't know. Okay, I don't know. That's all I can say. I'm sorry. Okay, this is from Sean. In Exodus 12:23, it says, the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians and will not suffer the destroyer to enter your house to destroy you if the blood is upon the lintel and side posts. Do you think the destroyer is the Lord himself? The book of Wisdom, chapter 18:14 through 16, explains it as your all-powerful word. Would that be Jesus? Yeah, that word there in the book of Wisdom, I presume that's the Wisdom of Solomon, an apocryphal book or a pseudepigraphical book. Yeah, they actually talk about the word, and they have this personification of the word, which is Jesus, right? So yeah, I actually think that's who it is. Let's take a look at the text, because I think when you see the text, I think, well, it's a little bit challenging. There's no question, But anyway, in chapter 12:12, excuse me. So he says, for I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. Okay. And he says, now the blood shall be a sign for you in the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Now, in the Haggadah, we read that he says, I and not an angel, I and not a seraph. Okay. So he seems like he's trying to make a point here that it's going to be him, right? That he will be the one who will do this. Okay. So, um, yeah. Now I think we kind of also, you get the sense that, well, maybe it was kind of an angel. And I think that's what the book of wisdom is trying to resolve, is that it was God, but somehow it wasn't God. Okay. And that's something that, as Christians who believe in the triune nature of God, this becomes a lot easier to resolve. And I want you guys to know this. And I'm not encouraging you to read the book of Zohar, because I know people get freaked out about it. So if you're not mature, don't read it. Okay. But if you are well grounded in scripture, you might want to peek at it, because there's a lot of interesting stuff in the book of Zohar. And again, I don't need the book of Zohar, but what's crazy is that the book of Zohar is actually quoting John 1:1. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was God, and the Logos was with God and was God, right? So, I mean, they quote that verbatim, and that's from the New Testament. They also quote 1 Timothy 5, where the unapproachable God who dwells in unapproachable light, right? They quote that from Paul. Now, why would they quote the New Testament? Well, it's possible that they're not quoting the New Testament. It's possible that both the New Testament and the book of Zohar are quoting an earlier source, a common source. That's one possibility. But it's pretty interesting. And the book of Zohar goes on to talk about the triune nature of God. I mean, they say it very clear. The Meshulash, it's talking about the Trinity, right? The triunity of God. And it says that God is 3 in 1. And you're like, wait, I thought Jews didn't believe in the Trinity, but turns out they do, right? And they just don't realize it much of the time. If you're interested, I have a teaching on this on YouTube. I think it called it the triune nature of God, or the Trinity, or triunity. Look it up. Just, you can search for those two different things there on my YouTube channel, and you'll find that. Okay. So do check that out. Okay, man, I got to keep going. So much to do. All right. Ken asks, in John 20:23, Jesus told the disciples, if you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained. New King James. What does this mean? What is meant by this? Do believers have the authority to forgive sins? Well, so there's seem to be probably two different possibilities, right? So he also talks in Matthew. So let me just hold on. Let me pull that up really quick. John 20:22, 23. Okay, so in Matthew 16:19, and I will give you the keys of the kingdom. Whatever you bind on earth will be, or will have been, bound in heaven. Whether you loose on earth will have been loosed in heaven. Also in Matthew 18:18, I say to you, whatever you bind on earth will have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth. Okay, so same thing, right? It's basically the same thing. So, so that's one possibility, is that they're simply pronouncing what has already been established in heaven. But I think there's another way to look at this. Jesus said, if you don't forgive, neither will your Father forgive you. Right? So therefore, we need to forgive people, because if I don't forgive this guy, which I have the power, right, and the authority to not forgive somebody. But Jesus is saying, okay, you can do that. But then guess what? Your Father's not going to forgive you. So it could be that, I have the prerogative to not forgive somebody. And if I don't forgive them, then that offense is retained. It doesn't mean in the universal sense that God won't forgive them. I really don't believe that. I don't think that anybody except God has the power to forgive. And of course, that's what Jesus was accused of. Hey, he's forgiving men's sins. Who can do that but God? Good point. So if I decide not to forgive, Bob, he's offended me. Well, that's my right to do that. But it doesn't mean that Bob's relationship with God is forever impaired. I really don't think that's what Jesus is suggesting. Okay. All right. Let's get to another question. This is from Ken. Why did Jesus entrust to John the care of his mother instead of his own brothers? Jesus would have known that at least 2 of his brothers would believe in him after the resurrection. Well, Ken, I think he certainly knew that, but he also knew that his brother James would die. So that may be one reason. And as far as Jude, well, maybe Jude just have a different path that he was supposed to go. And I think a really big one that kind of just shouting at me. Where were the brothers at the crucifixion? Right? It wasn't like Jesus is there. He's on the cross. Hey, go get my brothers. I gotta say something. Okay. John was the only guy there, and Mary was there. So he's probably looking. Well, he is. He's looking. Hey, John, behold your mother. Hey, mother, behold your son. Right? Where were the other sons? Nowhere to be found. So I would presume that is probably the big reason that Jesus entrusted that to John. All right, let's get to some more questions. I know you guys have some wonderful stuff in here. All right, this is from Kirby, who asks, "What is the biblical view on diet and exercise?" Well, so probably on diet and exercise, I would go to the book of Proverbs. Because there it talks a lot about the lazy man who turns over on his bed, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding the hands, and sudden destruction is going to come upon you. Now, that's not specifically for your diet, but that and those kind of wisdom passages are talking about someone who's lazy. The lazy man puts his hand to the bowl, can't even pull it back, right? He's just not doing stuff, right? So the Bible is very much into the I don't know, belief, philosophy, whatever's the right word there, that you should be taking care of your body, right? What's the passage? Paul talks about, earthly exercise. There's some benefit to it, right? I mean, it's not everything, right? So we have to have a balance because you can make this thing your god, and that's a bad idea because it will wear out and it will die. 100% chance it will die. So you got to be careful. But the book of Proverbs also talks about gluttony, right? So you do not want to be gluttonous. And there's a passage that Paul says, I think it's in First Corinthians or maybe it's in Philippians. I think it's in Philippians. It says that their God is their belly. I'm like, ooh, that's a tough one, right? That's probably fitting for quite a few Americans, right? That our God is our belly, or our belly is our God. So we want to discipline our bodies. We want to discipline our appetites. That's one reason it's good to fast every so often. And I think God actually built this in. Right now, we're celebrating the Feast of Unleavened Bread. What is the one thing you cannot have during the Feast of Unleavened Bread? You guessed it, leaven, right? Now, it turns out there's all kinds of medical benefits to not eating yeast for a while. Ever hear of somebody getting a yeast infection? What do you think that comes from? Wild guess. Yeast. Okay. So the one thing you should do, there's probably a few, but certainly if you have a yeast infection, you should stop eating yeast, right? Because yeast is that biological organism stuff that's in your body, and then it starts to break down and causes trouble, right? So taking a week off from yeast, good idea, right? Not eating for Yom Kippur, excellent idea. There's all kinds of studies that talk about, fasting now and then. It's really good to fast. So at least once a year, it's like, does your body a lot of good. And of course, in Leviticus chapter 11, God tells you this is food, this is not, right? These animals are on the menu, these animals are not. So God is very much interested and concerned about what we put into our bodies. So, I know, unfortunately, that the church at large has disregarded a lot of those dietary concepts, and I think to their own detriment. And I used to be there, so I'm not throwing any stones at them, but I think we definitely want to take care of our bodies. Man, that's a great question. Thank you. Something new. It was so good to have a different question. I appreciate that. All right. Very good. I'm looking for another question. Let's see. Okay, here's a question from the Great Commission. Jeremiah 11, 7 through 17, verse 8. Who are the three shepherds that were dismissed? Who is the shepherd raised up in verse 16? Same as the worthless shepherd in verse 17. Well, let's take a look at Jeremiah 11. All right. Okay. So, right. So do not pray for these people or lift up a cry or prayer for them. I will not hear them. What is my beloved to do in my house, having done lewd deeds with many, and the holy flesh has passed from you? When you do evil, then you will rejoice. I think you were referring to Zechariah, maybe? Yeah, there we go. Okay. You said Jeremiah, but you meant Zechariah. Okay. And the Lord said to me, next take for yourself the implements of a foolish shepherd, for indeed I will raise up a shepherd in the land who will not care for those who are cut off, nor seek the young, nor heal those who are broken, nor feed those who are still stand, but he will eat the flesh of the fat and tear their hooves in pieces. Woe to the worthless shepherd who leaves the flock. All right, so um, let me just say, I don't know who the three that were dismissed are. I'm not sure who that is. But as far as verse 17 goes, it's seriously cool. And I talk about this in Corrupting the Image, Volume 3, right? So it says, Hoi roi ha'elil. All right, this word right here is really interesting. All right, ha'elil, right? This right here. All right, so we talked about Enlil. We have Elil. So Enlil is the Akkadian. Hold on. Enlil is a Sumerian. There we go. Elil is a Sumerian, and a variation is Elil. Elil. And in the Bible, in Isaiah 14:12, it's Halel. Okay, so all of those are the same dude. But Elil or Elil, Elil, Enlil, Halel, right? They're all the same. They're just variations on the same theme. And it just so happens that we have this right here to the shepherd of Elil. Now, this word Elil often means idols, right? False gods. So it's interesting that in the Bible, when it's using the term idols or false gods, it's actually using the term Enlil to talk about it, and basically saying the shepherd of Satan or the shepherd of Enlil. So I would suggest that this passage right here is referring to the beast, or the Antichrist, that guy. Okay, wow, fantastic. That's really a fun one. All right, let's see. I think I got most of the questions in the app, which is great because I'm just about out of time. I really do appreciate it. Okay, it looks like we have a couple more questions. All right, so this is from Linda. John is wondering if there will be a roundtable Thursday. You didn't put it up. There will be. Yes, we're doing a roundtable this Thursday, and we're going to talk about the Nephilim DNA. We'll talk about snake venom, and there's a video going around talking about snake venom and water and COVID-19 and that kind of stuff. So we'll discuss that. So hope you can join us then. All right, this is from Jennifer. She says, could Neanderthal DNA be related to the Rephaim? Been reading Corrupting Image, book 1. Sorry if there's been asked a ton. It hasn't been asked that many times, so no worries, Jennifer. But so I just want to be careful, right? Because I think that's a possibility, and that would certainly explain where did they go if indeed the Rephaim are in fact the Neanderthals. So I think that's a possibility, and I think it's probably a strong possibility. But here's the thing: I have not done the research to equate the Neanderthals with the Rephaim. All right, so I just want to be very careful because I just haven't done the research. I haven't looked at the the literature that's talking about Neanderthals. I'm ignorant on Neanderthals, except for the basic things that most people know about Neanderthals. So what I do know about them, from little bits that I've read, is that they talk about how they were interbreeding with human women, which makes perfect sense because that's what we read about the Rephaim. So I think it's at least a strong possibility, but I'm just not equipped to go beyond that. So I wish I could. Wow, thank you guys. I can't believe I got through all those questions. They were fantastic. Really, I love your questions. So again, make sure to subscribe, to like this. If you think there's some answers in here that maybe a friend could use, hey, just share it with them. You can share and you can share exactly to the point where you want to. You just have to say, I'll start at this minute and seconds so that they can just hear that particular answer if there's a question that maybe some friends have been asking as well. You can go to patreon.com/Doug Hamp. You can give as little as $2 a month or whatever you want. Do appreciate it. Again, shout out to all my patrons already. Thank you very much. Make sure to get the app. You're going to love it. It's going to be great. And I hope you can join us on Thursday. And then on Shabbat, I am going through the book of Joshua. Oh, it's so good, the book of Joshua. Okay. And in a couple more chapters, we're going to get to some Nephilim stuff, which I really am excited about. So do check that out. And I look forward to seeing you then. Till next time, and I'll see you next week. So God